Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by BarrheadBoy.
And folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Been a week since we last spoke. I hope you're all well and yours are well. And you're keeping yourselves busy. The kids are back at school. Football season's begun. Full houses everywhere. So it's time we get back to business. Now, I'm delighted to say I'm joined today by two lovely ladies from the ALBA Party. And as we're in the conference season, I thought it was a good time to bring the ladies in. And I'm being joined by one of our, no stranger to the show, I'm joined by Suzanne Blackley for down there in the borders, and from Delia Henry, who is a newbie to our show. Delia, welcome to Through a Scottish Prism for your debut. I'm sure it won't be your last one, but welcome.
Thank you for having me, Roddy. I really appreciate the invitation.
It's a pleasure. A pleasure. Ladies, I've just mentioned that we're in conference season, and although you don't really want to talk about it and the voting's open, but you're standing in for two of the important posts for ALBA in its inaugural conference. You, Suzanne, are standing for Equalities Officer, or I think we call it that, or convener. I can't remember the full
convener,
title.
That's correct, Roddy.
There you go. And as membership convener or officer or whatever for you, Delia.
Yeah.
Which, well, I should do a wee advert because it shouldn't be. It's not something that's a stranger to either of you. The roles you're standing for, because you Delia, for example, you were 25 years working for a charity and looking after about 15,000 members. Am I right?
That's correct. Yes.
So you've got plenty of experience there, and you've been in chasing equalities all your life, Suzanne.
I have. So I've been working in the care profession for the last 20 years. So I've worked with people from all walks of life. Correct.
So it's, and I've got to say for all the candidates, so I'm not showing to be showing any favouritism because there's been no checks coming my way, folks. So until the checks start coming in, I have no favourites in this race or any of the races. But no, it's a really a great ensemble of candidates. The ALBA Party has definitely got some top talent going for every one of the jobs. It's just a pity we can't have joint and three for the one job, because I'm not being funny and I'm not saying it for the benefit of just now, but I don't know who the heck to vote for because they're all so good. I think I might have to put all the names in the hat, literally put the names in the hat and pull one out, unless the checks arrive, ladies and gentlemen standing, you know what? Make them out to cash. But it is a very exciting conference. And if you've looked at the agenda, I'm excited at the agenda. How about you, Delia? Do you think the agenda, does it remind you of the old SNP days when they actually had a conference that meant something?
Absolutely. I'm really quite excited and looking forward to decent debate and discussion. I didn't join a political party because of my job until 2014, and then I thought, enough, I need to really, really push for independence. But would sit in, because of my job, I went to all the party conferences, and the most grown-up politics that I had ever come across, you probably remember it, Roddy, was the debate on NATO at the SNP party conference. It was emotive, people were passionate, they had a vote, it came down to a really narrow vote, and at the end, the NATO debate won, and the motion won. But people recognised it was democratic. That's what I want to get back to in internal politics. I want a good democratic debate where people respect that kind of discussion. And I'm confident the ALBA conference will do that for us.
Suzanne, is there any particular one of the items on there that you've ticked off as this is the one I'm looking forward to the most? Or do you want me to give you some pointers? Now, the first one up is, which I know is a pet subject of yours, Suzanne, is the supporting the Scottish wool industry.
Oh yeah, that's a real passion of mine. No, in seriousness, I'm actually really excited about all the topics. I just think they've just such a wide range of topics to discuss. I mean, it's not going to be boring. It's going to be, everybody. There's something there for everyone. I think it's just absolutely brilliant the way that the conference committee have chosen these.
Mm-hmm. And these have come from the ordinary members, because the branches are still forming. It's come from the rank and file. Something, again, that used to happen in another party that doesn't happen anymore. But you know, some of my two pet projects, if you like, which is nuclear weapons. I'm one of the, and I like what they're saying here is that day one, take your weapons and get them out. None of this, let's talk about it. And it is I accept that it's a bargaining chip, Delia. I mean, you really could, because our English imperial masters do love their big boys' toys in the Clyde, and you could use it for a lot of leverage. But I want to see it out right away now. I'm willing to be convinced. Are you get it out day one, or do you think it should be used for leverage?
If we didn't have nuclear weapons in the Clyde, I would be delighted. There will be obvious resistance to it, but I'm with you. The sooner we can get rid of them, the better. You know, these weapons are driven through Glasgow. That's 5 miles down the road from me, and my family are all here. They're driven through the city. It's just appalling. But we've become, it's just there now. And it's about taking back control and making our own decisions. And that's why I'm encouraged by the agenda. You're talking about nuclear weapons. I'm delighted. Hey, we're talking about independence. Shock horror. We're also talking about things close to my heart, about poverty. We're talking about equalities. We're talking about women's rights. All of these things I'm passionate about. I mean, I campaigned for women's rights a long time ago. I'm an awful lot older than Suzanne. And I didn't think we'd be back to this in this day and age, but we are. And the agenda is encouraging me, is talking about the things that are close to my heart.
What about you, Suzanne? Are you do you think we should use it as a leverage, nuclear weapons, or do you want it out right away?
No, I don't think that nuclear weapons have any place in civilized society. I just think that the sooner we get them going, we've just got a massive target on our back. And when you see what's been going on in Afghanistan, can you imagine if the Taliban had nuclear weapons like that? I mean, there's no place. Why do countries in the world seem to think that they need to threaten each other? Why can't we just all live, you know, in harmony? We all came into the world the same way. We all go out the same way. I don't see the need for them at all. And really, my friend actually did a resolution for conference as well on nuclear weapons. And there's certain things in hers that I would like added to that. She actually discussed about, you know, Scotland and the ALBA Party, you know, calling on basically a worldwide ban of nuclear weapons rather than just, you know, in Scotland itself. And I think, you know, we could just go all the way with this, really.
Because it seems that the position of our friends in the SNP, as with everything else, has changed. Because in a recent interview on American television, Miss Sturgeon suggested that she was multilateralist as opposed to unilateralist. Yes. Now, from 1968, when I was in the party, till I left in 2020, we were unilateralists, and that was it. They were going, done. And now, and there was no debate at NEC, there's been no debate at conference. It just seems that, like so many other things, our Nicola has made a decision because she was in American television and they probably wouldn't like a unilateral stand. Or am I just being too cynical, Delia?
I don't think so. Because absolutely, the position was unilateral, you know, and suddenly you can't just go and give a soundbite for something like that. That is such a massive change in policy, but it's also a massive impact on our society. You know, for me, nuclear weapons, you know, saying a weapon's a deterrent, that just doesn't make sense to me. You know, a weapon's designed to be used. I would want rid of them. My personal position in that. And I think as soon as we possibly could get rid of them after independence would be my favourite position. I know some people think you could use it as a bargaining tool, and there'll be a lot of resistance. So we would need to be brave over it. We would need to be brave. It wouldn't just be England or you know, the United Kingdom. We would be getting a lot of pressure from America over this. So we need to think about that, and we need to stand up and be counted, in my opinion.
Personally, I'd put them on eBay day one, but that's just me.
That would be silly, because you might get folk to buy them. They would be bidding on them, Roddy.
Oh, Mr. Putin. Yeah, you're looking for any. But no, the ridiculous thing about the deterrent one, Tony Blair himself, when he wrote one of his books, autobiographies or biographies, or whichever it was, but he was quoted as saying that they were just a vanity product for the UK. I mean, we have got enough weapons, I believe, to kill 20 million Russians, for example. Mm-hmm. Well, they lost that in the Second World War anyway. So if we take out 20 million, there's still 200 million of them left, and they've got enough to blow us back to the Stone Ages. You can kill 20 million Chinese. There's 1.4 billion Chinese. So they're of no use. I mean, it's not as if they're going to tip in our balance. And again, rumour has it, I don't know, we've never used them, and I hope we don't. We have to get the Americans' permission to use them anyway. But we can't afford to feed our children. We can't afford to give our pensioners a decent pension. We can't afford to build decent houses, but we can afford to spend 250 billion, and no doubt that will get higher on nuclear weapons. No, it's got to go. One of the other ones, Suzanne, I'd like to talk about, one of the other resolutions is women and equalities. Mm-hmm. Now that comes into focus for just on Friday of this week, the announcement of the SNP and the Greens for a deal, which I'm sure my guests and I will be discussing in great length later. But they've said that within 5 years there will be a referendum, just in time for the next Holyrood election. What a coincidence. Just one more mandate. But within 12 months, they're going to bring in GRA reform, which is going to attack women and equalities. Now, that must be a huge concern for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it boggles my mind why people don't see the problem here. They can bring this in within the next year, but we can't, go for independence. They're not even given a date. I mean, that's the crazy thing about it. They're not even given a date, but the danger, and it's not, and I know that the ALBA Party has had a lot of criticism about being transphobic. That's not the case at all, because our issue isn't just women's rights, it's protecting the transgender community also, because it also puts them at danger if we open up safe spaces to anyone who self-IDs as a transgender woman. It's, who's the first people that the public are going to go after if women start getting attacked in public toilets and changing rooms and things like that? They're going to go after the transgender community. And that's not fair. I agree that the system and how much it costs to identify as a trans woman is ridiculous. But that's where the discussion needs to be, about how to reduce the cost and to make the process easier. It's certainly not about opening up women's safe spaces after a matter of weeks of somebody living as a woman. That's just not how you do things. You have proper discussion and you make sure that it's right for everybody. You don't take rights from one group and give them to another.
Absolutely. The thing, Delia, that gets me is that I wrote a blog quite some time ago where I said, and I have to openly admit it, being in the Yes movement made me a better person. I think it made me a more tolerant person, a more inclusive person. And I'm going back to 2014. All of that happened, I think, made all of us better people. And it opened my eyes to it now. And everyone I've spoken to about, and what happened through Section 28 was another great thing, I think, for the whole of Scotland, when that discussion came out. And it made us all more tolerant, more accepting. And the great thing about the Yes movement is it's always been inclusive. Now, along comes this, and there's no debate. It's exclusive. These people are bullying, threatening. I mean, I've been, not that I matter, but I've been kicked off of Facebook for a month for daring to say that we need to debate this. There is no debate in it, and it's bullying the whole way. And they've brought the transphobia. They've made people transphobic that never gave it a thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's become a toxic situation. This, I said before, I was at an ASO debate, and that was grown-up politics for me.
Yeah.
You can have very emotive issues, but you need to debate them. You need to do it respectfully. And people, we live in a democracy, thank God. Now, that debate needs to be had. However, it's not Twitter that should be had on. For me, the whole GRA thing is a concern because of safeguarding. That concerns me. And I worry about the implications of all of this. Like Suzanne, I can honestly say, hand on my heart, that I'm not prejudiced against any group or any individual. I've worked in equalities for 25 years. So if there's an issue that has to come out to be debated, I want to hear it. I will take a position on it, but I want it to be respectful. But I worry about how this is being done and pushed through without a debate. You know, we had in Scotland recently, we had a citizens' assembly on the environment. So for me, something like that, which is informed, you've got 100 random citizens who'll debate an issue and then we come up with a position, that would be sensible, in my opinion. But this is horrible. People are being targeted. And, you know, we've got folks women who've lost their jobs because they're taking a position. That's just terrible. We should never be in that position. Never.
No. It is a worry. And it shows the priorities of our present government. And, this coalition of the SNP and Greens is not about getting independence, as they're trying to tell you. It's about this particular toxic, as you've quite rightly called it, a toxic subject that has divided not just the SNP but the Yes movement. And I think when it gets into the public, it'll cause toxicity, whatever it is it's highlighted. But back to the conference, there's other things. There is talk of an independence convention as well. We are talking, as one of you charming ladies alluded to right at the beginning, we're going to be talking about independence. Isn't that fabulous? It's not been talked about since 2014. And here's a group of independence-minded folk are going to talk about it and plan more than anything else. Isn't that just so exciting, Suzanne?
It really is. It's something, I mean, and, you know, the paper that I wrote about unpaid carers that you published, thank you very much, on your blog, I did say that. There should have been, the SNP and the Scottish Government should have already done this. They should have had this in place. They should have had groups from every department, from education to health, to finance, business. This should all have been done. This was what lost us the last referendum. People believed the lies because we had nothing to come back at them with, to say, well, actually, this is what would be the case in an independent Scotland. We didn't have that. And we've spent the last 7 years not doing the planning that we should have been doing. And I'm so delighted that the ALBA Party is actually, taking the bull by the horns with this and actually saying, right, we need to do this planning, or we're not going to win another referendum. That's the position we're going to end up in, because there's nothing in place to show people, look, don't worry, don't be frightened by what the MSM are saying about scaremongering. They were scaremongering pensioners, saying you won't get your pension, your house will be devalued. We'll have all that in place to say, look, here's the evidence. This is actually how it's going to look in an independent Scotland. It's just going to make such a massive difference to the campaign in general.
Absolutely.
And also, they're tackling things. The ALBA Party at this conference is tackling all sorts of things that are needing to be tackled, that we should have been tackled and been tackled by others. One of them is council tax, for example, and about how we should, which the SNP been threatening to do back to Alec's time, when Alec was still in charge, about replacing the council tax with a progressive tax. So I find that another great debate that I'm thoroughly looking forward to hearing. And also child and family poverty. Now that is, more than nuclear weapons or getting, gender recognition, men into women's safe spaces, etc. Poverty is the root of practically all the problems that we have of life expectancy, of disease, illness, crime, everything you can think of, you can take it back to poverty. So it's time we address that. One of the richest countries in the world, and we've got how many people at food banks? How many kids going hungry tonight? Well, we're sitting here. It's disgraceful, and it's time it was talked about, Delia, and a plan put in place.
I couldn't agree more, Roddy. Years ago, I ran a health event in Castlemilk, and not in in Drumchapel, and the life expectancy of a man, the difference in the life expectancy of a man 20 years ago in Castlemilk to, Castlemilk, Drumchapel to Bearsden, which is a mile up the road, was 10 years. A recent, and I come from East End of Glasgow, a recent study came out, and it's increased to 17 years life expectancy difference of a man from poor areas in Glasgow to the richer areas just up the road. That's immoral. We should never, ever be in that situation. So independence for me is about taking control of the situation, and that stops. That's what we should be planning from now. So from day one, we're addressing that. And it's just immoral. And I am appalled when you look at these statistics. It just makes me angry, and it motivates me more to work for independence. And that's why this conference is about us in ALBA shaping what our position is and taking that forward, because we can make a massive difference. Because as things stand, as you said, Suzanne, and as you said, Roddy, it's looking like ALBA, the only party in Scotland just now that are going to talk about independence. So let's do it. And the Greens and SNP aren't, because the Greens aren't that interested in independence, frankly. They're just not. So we're the party that can do that.
To me, everything starts from the problem. It's one of the biggest one for me. Weapons of mass destruction, yes, but I would rather see child poverty and food banks. I'd like to see the food banks gone before the weapons of mass destruction, even. But to me, everything starts at the top, and I think an unelected head of state is one of the biggest problems in the UK. And we're in the Union, and it spreads into Scotland, because it's all about patronage, it's all about status, it's all about baubles, unelected peers, favourites, knighthood, all this stuff. And so the ALBA Party, for the first time ever, the SNP were never brave enough to have this debate, which is on the monarchy. And I expect that of all nuclear weapons, I expect to be carried by acclaim.
Yes.
Because I can't think of many people who are independentistas who want to keep the Germanic monarchy in place. But I think it's a brave move, Suzanne, to actually say, tell you what, we're going to talk about it.
It's amazingly brave, because, as you say, nobody wants to mention that. It's one of these things that everybody thinks about, but nobody actually talks about. And I'm really looking forward to having that debate about the monarchy. I mean, I've got my own opinions. I would like Scotland, an independent Scotland, to be a republic.
Mm-hmm.
Not the rebels.
That's Suzanne.
I see no place in modern society for a monarchy. It's outdated, and I don't see what benefit it brings to people who are having to use food banks.
No, I totally agree. It's an anathema that we're currently still in that situation. And when I saw that, I was delighted, because I agree with you completely. I mean, my personal preference would be a republic, but to actually start the debates, back to what I said before, we need to start it. It will be an interesting one, but I'm delighted, actually.
But they don't stop at that. They're also having a debate on prostitution and legalising it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're going to have the wee free after this. We're going to have the orange order after this. We're going to have, you know, the knuckle draggers going mental. You want rid of the Queen. You want to legalise the prostitutes. But again, it's, you know, it's best practice if you look at the countries that have legalised it. And it goes back to the rights, you know, because if it was men that was being exploited, and I speak, if it was men that were being exploited, this would never have happened. It would have been legislated against centuries ago. That's a fact. And I think, again, it's another brave move, Delia. We're prepared, the ALBA Party are prepared to talk about this subject, which, again, will have two opposing camps. There'll be those who'll be, oh, we can't talk about that, oh, no. And there'll be those who say, yeah, well, we need to talk about it. And I think we do need to. It goes back to the poverty thing, surely. Poverty creates, you know, a demand, you know, people, that's how a lot of, you know, it's not, you don't go to your careers officer and say, I'd like to be a prostitute. It seems like a good life. It is poverty, again, is one of the main problems, but I think it's brave. Don't you, Delia, discussing this?
I think it's actually grown-up politics, and yes, brave that we're talking about the issue, and you know, evidence shows you that women who are in prostitution are exploited, and often are trafficked, and there's a whole lot of exploitation of women in there. And as someone who has campaigned since the 70s for women's rights, I think it's absolute. I was delighted to see it. And controversial, you know, are we going back to the days of in Scotland, oh, you can't talk about that? Well, yes, we will. And it's how you make change. So, and I was really pleased to see it, and credit to the person who submitted the motion, and to the conference committee for selecting it. I think that's great.
Well, there's other debates on the climate change, climate energy, which is, again, a massively important thing, Suzanne, that we can't, I mean, the weather, everywhere now, the weather is, I mean, even here it's been strange where I am. Scotland, it's been, they've had a thing called sunshine for several weeks in Scotland, unheard of. But, you know, you're seeing, and seriously, I mean, I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago, the fires in the Greek islands when that boat was coming. It was like something out of a Hollywood blockbuster apocalypse movie. Climate change is here. It's not possible if we don't change. It's here. We need to address it. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's you know, I don't know how anybody couldn't be moved. I watched a news programme about the fires in Turkey, and I was seeing people standing at the side of the road crying, you know, absolutely devastated. Their homes, they'd lost their cattle, which they rely on to sustain themselves. And I just think, you know, how anybody could say that there isn't an issue. I mean, the weather has, the fact that we had this glorious sunshine for a fortnight, I was just like, oh, how's this happened? And it's true. You see it. You just have to look on the news every day. You're seeing something every day that's caused by climate change. And I'm so happy that the conference is going to take all these important issues and discuss them, because why should any political party shy away from anything? We're there to be held accountable. We're there to change people's lives. We're there to make people's lives better. So we've got to tackle the hard issues and find the best way to come round to them. I know there's been debate about the oil. I think that there's two ways to look at it. I think that we need to use the oil supplies that we have in order to fund going forward into a more sustainable Scotland. I think that that's something we need to do, but it needs to be done. It's a very difficult balance to achieve, but we can't just say overnight, right, we're cutting off oil supplies. We just can't do that. It needs to be a gradual process, and that's something that the government should be sorting out.
Well, I had a discussion with this last week with some guys, and the other thing is that people say, well, you know, the Greens, let's just stop it. I've got a friend of mine who's in the pharmaceutical industry, and all these stuff that, you know, much of the stuff, including syringes that are used, come from plastics. Plastics comes from oil. You know, we need to keep you can't make plastics for anything but oil, unless some of our viewers know something different. If they do, let's go into the Dragon's Den and make a few quid. But we can't just stop it. That'd be unrealistic. But again, because time's always an enemy in the show, so I'd like to crack a few other things in if we may, because the stuff in this conference is going to be great. But one of the other ones, Delia, which is that there's a motion in front of conference that to suggest that Scotland should immediately apply for EFTA membership as opposed to EU as soon as it's practicable after independence, and then at a later stage give the Scottish people a debate, and a proper debate on European Union membership and a referendum at a later stage. I like that one. How about you? Do you think it's a good one?
I do, and I think it's a good interim measure because it can be implemented quickly after independence. And then we do need to have the debate about, do we want to be back in the EU? There are pros and cons in that. But EFTA could be done pretty quickly. We've had a good response initially from EFTA about Scotland being a member. And in terms of all of the criteria that they would have, we would be able to comply relatively quickly. And it would be beneficial. And it's also a kind of transitioning position between if the Scottish people eventually want to go back into Europe, we would need to negotiate that, and that's not going to happen overnight. So yes, I would be supporting that motion because I think it's a very sensible way to go. I think we have to think about it for trading, and we have to think about Scotland in the world, and that would be a really good option to take quite quickly.
Another one I would think would be, I'd like to see him, and it's not been mentioned, it might come into the debate when it happens, is for Scotland to quickly, in fact I would do it now, join the Nordic Council. And I think that's another great way for us in the world. But also the other one is that they want to set up immediately an independent and democracy committee with the approval of conference. They will, which will look at different ways of using our sovereignty of the people of Scotland as a route towards independence. Now that one. But I say, I like the nuclear weapon. Oh, but I like the monarchy one. I like them all. I'm liking them all. But I love that one, where we don't hang about. We don't wait 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We go now, as soon as we possibly can. Suzanne, does that one get you?
Do you know what? I've always said that we can't just sit about waiting for a referendum. We have to be exploring every possible method of getting our independence. And, this reliance on Holyrood elections, why can't we use a Westminster election as well? I just feel that we can't just sit in our hands when it comes to independence. We have to explore every avenue. And, I'll take whatever way we can get it, to be quite honest with you. That's the stage I've got to now. It's just like, right, let's just get on with it, because you just see the absolute farce that's going on in Westminster day in, day out, and you just sit there with your head in your hands thinking, come on, there's got to be more to life than this.
Yeah, it's this week, Delia. I wrote a blog about it. The pomposity, the absolute delusion that was going on in Westminster this week about Afghanistan, and how they were going to. I don't know what they were going to do. Send a strongly worded letter. We won't put up with this, and this is terrible. Listen, you're a small country, a small union. 3 countries and 6 counties. You're no longer an empire, boys. Waking up, know your place. Leave it to the big boys. Just go on with getting rid of the food banks. Go on with getting rid of poverty. Go on with getting rid of drug abuse. Just leave the big stuff to the big boys. Westminster, you don't count, especially since you've left the EU.
I agree. I'm fed up asking Westminster for permission. I'm fed up with it. We need to take control in Scotland, and we're not doing that. The current Scottish government are just, they're an administration, they're not a government. So that needs to stop, and we stop asking for permission. So we look for any mechanism possible to say, we're going for a referendum, and we're doing it as quickly as possible. We're waiting to the next election. How many mandates have we got through elections? And nothing has happened. That's got to stop. So for me, it's about enough, just enough. We are going to do this. And how would they stop us?
Yeah. we've got to move. Ladies, we're running out of time, and I can't get time to get. This is how good this agenda is. We haven't got through it all. There's more that we could discuss, and we could probably do 2 or 3 programs on it, and I probably will with some of the other candidates, and certainly with my guests later today. I'll be talking about some of it. But to me, the most important thing about this conference is it's like it's going to be a bonding. It's going to be the actual arrival. It's the first time the ALBA Party has been able to get together. And while a lot of us, the majority, have been together at SNP conferences, probably because, let's be honest, about 90% of the people who are in ALBA, if not higher, come from what I call the fundamental wing of the SNP and the activist wing of the SNP. And that's why our conference has been oversubscribed, and there's about 20%, and you could have sold another 20% of the entire membership turning up at this conference. But that, to me, is going to be the important thing, is bonds getting made, that togetherness and that uniting. So that excites me. I think the atmosphere will be electric.
I Absolutely. It's critical for the members to get together. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say that because because our members are going to be the driving force to get where we want to be. If there are 6,000 people out there who are up and running and want to campaign for independence, we need to get folks together, work together, because they'll exchange ideas, and it'll make people feel we're going to deliver. So I absolutely agree.
And Suzanne, are you excited?
Absolutely. This is actually my first conference.
Really?
I never got to attend. I was a member of the SNP for years, and I never got to attend the conference. I've got 3 young children, and now that they've got older, it's time to go to a conference. I'm really excited about it. This is just a massively new experience for me, and I'm just so excited about the agenda.
You'll love it, and it's, as we've discussed, it's a really, really exciting agenda. And as you ladies have displayed tonight, we have got some fantastic candidates standing for the different posts. And if you're in the ALBA Party, you're spoiled, folks, for choice. And I wish you well. I'm going to wish well to everybody, because it's quite difficult. We are blessed. So, ladies, firstly, let me thank you for joining me and bringing some sense and glamour to this show, because I've got Iain Lawson to come next, and that's sort of, this balances it. I've got to have him on. He's poor soul. He's got nothing else to do. I take him under my wing because he's nothing else in his life. This is it. So thank you for being here, and I'll look forward to meeting and greeting you and speaking to you as soon as possible.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Well, that was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it, as I say, as much as I do. Now, moving on to the show, to my regulars, of course, I have the Paisley Mohawk himself, Iain Lawson, and I'm glad to say we're joined with a newbie again on the commenting. Iain, how are you, my friend?
Very well, thank you, despite your rather cheeky remarks towards the end of the first set.
What can I say? I suitably chastised, and I'm, more glamour to the show. We invite. We've got Heather with us. It's a newbie as well on the show now. Heather, someone who's been involved from a very political family, was a candidate for the ALBA Party in the recent May elections, and prior to that, like most of us on here, was also a member of the SNP and active in the Yes campaign and the 2014 campaign. Heather, thank you for giving us some time and joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Great.
Well, I hope so. Anyway.
Well, I hope you enjoy it. Time it's all over.
I'm glad to see you here, Heather. I thought we were I was going to be in the ugly side of the broadcast, so I'm glad to see there's a bit of glamour in the form of you. Well, this proves what you said earlier.
Iain, it has been a hell of a week for politics, and you've been quite active yourself, my big friend, throwing a few hand grenades here and there.
I've had a couple of good posts. My blog's been going absolutely wild this week because, you know, obviously the story about India on the day of Jers had a huge impact, and then amusingly being leaked both the Green Deal and governance review on the same day has given me quite a ammunition depot for the days ahead, shall I say. You know, I thought it was quite amusing that Mike Russell he tweeted that what I had written was inaccurate. I had to remind them that I had the same papers that he had. The only debate was who got them first.
Yeah. They don't know it's still leaking, but they do now. Yes. But on just a quick one on the Gers before we move on. I don't know what you think, but I'm finding even the unionists are not there. They're beginning to treat it as a load of nonsense as much as we do. Although I think we should treat it with more contempt. But to suggest that Scotland, with 8.9% of the population of the union, is responsible for, what is it, 30% of the debt when they can't borrow. I mean, they're pushing the bounds of believability, you know, beyond.
Absolutely, and we're the only part of the United Kingdom that has an export surplus, a balance of payment surplus.
Yep. And oil.
And we've got oil, you know, which they don't credit us with. So, I mean, it's all a lot of nonsense, and it's always been a lot of nonsense. Iain Lang set it up as what he thought would be a once-a-year political hit at the SNP.
Oh, he's right.
Well, it is, isn't it? Isn't it? People have become immune to it. I mean, it's too easy to display. I mean, why should Scotland be apportioned, you know, our population share of HS2, which is never going to come to Scotland?
Or the Crossrail or the London sewers.
Exactly, the whole host of infrastructure improvements in the southeast. You know, I mean, I know Scottish Oil paid for them in the past, the M25 and everything else. That was Scotland's oil that paid the cost of that. But, I mean, they're just pushing it too far now, and nobody believes it. I don't think people are interested, you know.
Yeah, I would love to see some equivalent figures for England, because we don't get that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the thing people need to remember is that the UK extracted £50 trillion, 17 times Britain's GDP today from India, but still managed to return an equivalent Gers figure every year, which showed they were doing India a favour and India had a deficit and were only surviving thanks to the generosity of London. You know, there's no credibility in this, and nobody that, you know, is serious about politics takes it seriously.
Yeah. What have you heard? Are you noticing that the unionists are not being quite as vociferous when Gers comes out?
Well, I mean, really, I think Richard Murphy is the person that really coined it as crap, isn't it? Completely rubbish approximation, and I think that just about hits the nail on the head as far as Gers goes. I mean, one of the best analogies I saw was on Twitter. I mean, I'm just not really a Twittery person, but I'm just kind of getting to grips with it. But I read. Someone had written, Gers is the woman down the street orders stuff from the K's catalogue using your address and makes it look like, you know, you're the one that owes the dosh. That's Gers for Egypts. I mean, for me, it's like, you know, my next door neighbour, I'm paying for my next door neighbour's electricity bill, their council tax, just because I'm in a semi-detached. I mean, it's ridiculous, and I think it's now at the stage where people are kind of, you know, they do think that it's a joke, and it's no one's taking it seriously, and I actually don't think that you're right. The unionists are not really taking it seriously either. Because it's been debunked. But what bothers me is why does the SNP government accept it? Why is there no rebuttal? You know, we were supposed to have a rebuttal unit. I mean, I've never heard rebuttals of anything. And this is something that they can really go to town and set the rebuttal unit in action on. But
well, the rebuttal unit's too busy attacking women and ALBA supporters actually to be bothering about those unionists, or should I say fellow unionists, which brings me nicely on, Heather and Iain, to what's got to be the biggest disgrace, news story, whatever you like, I don't know what to call it, the SNP Greens agreement, a deal, I don't know what you want to call it, Iain. To me, it's just a con job. Yeah. What do you make of it?
Well, it's typical of the way the SNP has been run these days. I mean, the Greens have admitted publicly they have 7,000 members. The SNP don't tell us what their membership figures, but the last time they reported them, they said it was 125,000. So it's interesting that in this new SNP government, Green government, Greens are going to have two seats out of perhaps, I don't know, 14, 16 members, something like that, way above what their level should be. The maximum should be 1. The second thing, of course, you've got to remind everybody that we're only months after an election campaign where the SNP said it was absolutely crucial that they had a majority, and it had to be a majority, and, both votes SNP, which of course worked because it kept ALBA out the race, but then left them with their favoured partner. And it was clear during the election, if there was a deal to be made in the next parliament, it was going to be with the Greens. It's got nothing to do with independence. In fact, I thought what was said was quite insulting to the Greens. I mean, basically what they were saying is we had to bring them in to get them to support an independence referendum, which in effect means they wouldn't have supported an independence referendum if they hadn't been given ministerial posts. So, it was pretty insulting to the Greens. I've got the actual agreement. There's a surprise. That'll keep everybody at SNP headquarters delighted, because I've got chapter and verse on it. And I could actually... I
take it mine's in the post, my copy.
Well, if you want one, I'll have it with you after the programme. How I would describe it is a green cake and eating it, having a green cake and eating it, all the way through. Let me just give you one example. There's a clause in it which gives the Greens carte blanche to do deals with other parties during the time. They're not tied into supporting the SNP all the time. On certain issues they are, but on the vast majority, they're free to do deals with other parties. So they could do a deal with Labour, they could do a deal with the Tories, they could do a deal with the Liberals, and the SNP can say nothing about it. Yet they're going to get 2 ministerial posts. I mean, this is to get GRA and hate crime through. There's no other reason for it. Nicola must be, this encourages me, Nicola must be expecting some MSPs to rebel against GRA. And this is her organising to make sure that even if that group's quite substantial, she's going to have enough votes with the Greens, probably Labour as well, to be able to get it through. But it's a sign maybe of trouble ahead. I wouldn't be popping the champagne corks at this stage, because I think you may find by the time you come to drink it, it's going flat.
So, Heather, the other thing that, Iain's touched on it. What do you think now? If you're an SNP, MSP with ambition, and you're sitting on the back benches, and suddenly you see, wait a minute, there's 2 slots gone. They're bringing in people who didn't win a first-past-the-post seat. I've won a first-past-the-post seat with a, 5,000, 6,000, 2,000 majority. I've campaigned, and I've lost my chance of promotion because they're bringing in these Greens who couldn't win a 2-horse race when they had both horses in the race. Would you not be a wee bit pissed off if you were one of those MSPs?
Yeah, I think I would be, but I think I'd be even more pissed off if I was a person who had voted SNP 1 and 2 because I wanted an SNP government. And, at least the Greens are going to be asking their members whether they agree with this. The SNP members are not being asked, they're being told. But then I think that's indicative of everything that happens within the SNP now. It's been run as, you know, almost like a dictatorship. What Nicola says she wants, Nicola gets. You know, I actually think, who voted for this? Nobody voted for this. You know, if they'd wanted to have an alliance of some description with the Greens, why were they saying SNP 1 and 2? Why did they not say vote SNP in the constituency and give your second vote to Greens? That's not what people voted for. And, you know, I think they'll maybe live to regret it. You know, I'd be saying to Patrick Harvey, you know, enjoy this, because this is the one and only chance you will ever get to hold a ministerial post. Because I think at the end of this, especially when they bring in the GRA and all the other woo-woo policies that they want, I think people will really open their eyes to the Greens, and I think the Greens would be lucky to even get in on, you know, the regional seats in future. You know, I think they'll live to regret it. I think Alex Cole-Hamilton was bumping his gums about that this morning, and he should know.
Who cares?
Yes, but the thing is, he should know, because his party, the Lib Dems, was the party that had a coalition with the Tories, and I think they're living to regret that. So I think the Greens will possibly live to regret this. You know,
I worry more, Heather, that the Scottish people will live to regret this.
Oh yeah, they will, definitely, and that's what I'm saying. You know, enjoy it now, Patrick. Enjoy it, because this is your only chance. After this, you know, you've taken the poison chalice. You will not get the support in any future election, I don't think. I think people will really waken up to what the Greens in Scotland are all about, and it's not protecting the environment, it's not land reform, it's not all the things, you know, clean energy and all this that they are pretending to care about. That's not what the Greens are all about. Not this lot anyway.
Well, Andy Whiteman shows up. Iain,
I don't see the political preparation that should be going on here. I mean, we've got COP26 coming, you know, to Glasgow in November. You know, it's an opportunity for us in Scotland to put real pressure on Westminster and challenge them and say, look, this has been held in our country. And the Prime Minister was up here a couple of weeks ago, and he was toying on TV about what, you know, part Nicola Sturgeon would be given. You know, now that to me is a great opportunity. We should be saying to the world, here we are a few months away from one of the most important conferences in the world, and we as a people don't know whether Scotland will even have a voice at it, or whether she's coming along as a cleaner with her vacuum cleaner. I mean, and a new green uniform, you know. I mean, we really need to put some pressure on, and there's just no fight in the independence movement.
No, I mean, Iain, if there was, this is an opportunity for Nicola Sturgeon to unite the movement, to, you know, would have been not to do a deal with the Greens, but to do a deal with ALBA and ISP and Scotia Future, the real independence parties, and say, at COPs, we are going to demonstrate AUOB. We want you to get everyone out you can, get hundreds in the streets outside the conference shouting, this is our country, we're excluded. The independence movement's here. Absolutely. This was a tremendous, but no, it's all to be about Nicola getting a guest spot so she can give her green credentials, or pretendy, which she'll drop as soon as it suits her, like she did independence.
She'll get the role of the provost when a big conference comes to your town, and the provost is allowed in and say 3 minutes about welcome to your town, and then kicked out and the serious business begins. That's the best she can hope for.
Yeah. Colonialism run riot. It just shows you how much of a colony we are. This is happening, Heather.
Yeah.
Because we are a colony. I mean, let's just get that out there. But none of this, we're an equal partner in a union. We're a colony.
But what gets me is it's like they just accept that. They're not even shouting about it. You know what I mean? It's that's something that should be getting shouted from the rooftops. There's no fight back. You know, there's no assertion of, you know, us being a nation, and I just think she fails on every opportunity to promote the Scottish people and to promote this country and to actually make the case. She never seems to take that opportunity.
Now, Iain, here's the thing. You're the head of the Independence Party. You're the biggest party in the Parliament. You're bringing in a junior partner. And we say, here's the priorities. Independence is the first priority. But no. The first priority we've given in the next 12 months is the GRA reform bill. Yep. So is Nicola Sturgeon so weak, so spineless, that she lets that wee pipsqueak jumped up Greens leader tell her what's the priority? Or is she, as people like me are suggesting, her raison d'etre is gender reform, not independence. She's used the independence vehicle to get her narrow points of view across. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, it's clearly going to be GRA, hate crime bill. They're the priorities. And I mean, I'm going to have more to say about this as the week goes on. You want to see the appendix to the governance report. I mean, you can think of a phobia. I'll tell you now, it's in there. It's pages and pages long. It's a 40-page report. And from what I can work out, 6 or 7 of them are taking up with describing different phobias. You know, so even when they're having an internal examination of the party structure, etc., the gender crew are in there full whack. And there's going to be more problems because, you know, if you think back, they're cutting away the regional reps. They were based on the sexes. There was a male and a female from each region. That's now coming down to only 8 across the country. And the warnings in there, it's saying this will affect the gender balance. And the committee will have to look at ways of engineering this. So before you know it, there'll be, you know, 4 women, one Asian, one coloured gentleman, one disabled, and ordinary delegates will be doing 4. The minority in Scotland is folk that are normal, that have none of these problems, that come from none of these minority. A white heterosexual male over 40 has no prospect of doing anything whatsoever in Scotland anymore. You're now the minority of all minorities.
And women, 40-year-old heterosexual women as well, are a minority.
Absolutely.
And it's not just that, it's the fact that worse than that is that the people, the members elect, have been reduced to an outside minority. They've been treated abominably, the members and the membership. Now, I'm glad to say that the ALBA Party, whose conference is coming up soon, are going the opposite way. They're going the absolute opposite way, where the members' votes for the ordinary NEC members is going to be the ones that count and nothing else, which is the way it should be. But we also had Mike Russell with his horse box, embarrassing. I know it is, it's embarrassing. No Shergar, but we've got the horse box. And it kind of shows you, as someone put on Twitter again, we're talking about it earlier, 2 buses vote me, both votes SNP. But for independence, here's a horse box. Kind of shows the priorities again, Heather, does it not? And he's screaming for unity. And I want to come back to you in a minute, Iain, on this, but first Heather. But he's screaming for unity and wants the nastiness to stop. But we know which way the nastiness comes.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be embarrassed if I was Mike Russell. I mean, I think of him as one of the sort of, you know, the more people in the SNP as with some gravitas, or at least I used to. But, you know, a horse box, I mean, I think that's, I don't know, it's a bit insulting, really. I don't know whose idea that was, the horse box. They might at least have given him a camper van or something. A horse box. I mean, what does that say? What does that image conjure up?
But the other thing, I don't know if you noticed, Heather, and I think it's very subtle, there was no SNP signage on that. It was all yes in the the trans colours and things like that. So it's now, this belongs to us, the SNP, nobody else, not ALBA, not the Yes movement, just to us. We own it.
Yeah.
We control it. That's what that says to me. Or they think it is, they control it.
You know, all through the independence referendum, they were very quick to say, you know, it's not all about SNP, it's about independence, it's about no parties and all parties, it's about the people of Scotland. But since the referendum, it seems to be,
since Sturgeon.
Yes, the SNP want to own the copyright on independence. You can't have it both ways. And of course, there's lots of independence supporting groups all around the country. They're just waiting for to spring into action. If only she would name a date. That's not. I mean, and I can't see that happening. So she wants to control the whole thing. This nonsense about getting people involved and everything. I think that's just all talk. If she was genuinely wanting people to all be involved, then there wouldn't have been all the vitriol, aimed at other independence supporting parties during the election campaign. I mean, ALBA came in for some really, really terrible stick.
Yeah.
She never. I mean, what really, really disgusted me was the fact that ALBA were no platforms, but Nicola never missed an opportunity to, take a pop at Alec and his suitability for office and all sorts of things. I mean, when he had no chance to sort of, he had no right of reply, he had no opportunity to sort of defend himself, and that's just that really disgusted me.
Yeah, well, she's a bully. She's a bully. There's no doubt about it. Iain, in January the 31st, in the front page of the National, we had one of those famous. I mean, the headline that the National used more than anything else is "Independence 2 is on the way, referendum, etc. on the way." I don't think they have another headline, but on that day, there was an article by Mike Russell saying, by Christmas you can have a referendum. We were getting close to an election. He said that. Could we have one by? We could have. That was the implication. Then he came up the day before National Assembly, where they were going to discuss Plan B and Plan C for independence. He came out with his famous 11-point plan. Well, prior to this, I say, so that was now the independence referendum by December's gone. We're now on to an 11-point plan. Now, right after the election, we know that up until March, Iain, there was no work. After March, there was no work done on the draft referendum bill, and still been none done on it. Then they've come up. Now he's come up with, oh well, we're starting to get a referendum campaign going. 7 years in, it's lies, Iain. I can't dress it away. It's not even politics or that's what happens. It's lies.
Well, I mean, what they're trying to do, I mean, I can see the escape route looming up large. What they're doing is they're going to reduce the support for independence down to a level where nobody will want a referendum because the chances are we would lose it. And I mean, that's where they're taking us. That's where GRA comes in. That's where all this nonsense comes from. They want to stay in power, but not have to deliver an independence referendum. And the second thing I would say is we don't want a referendum if it's to be based on the same franchise as was used in 2014, because given the inward drift from the rest of the UK into Scotland, those numbers which voted, 72% against independence the last time and took away the Scots majority, which had voted yes, that'll be even more substantial. And one of the interesting things, I saw someone point this out, I think it was on Twitter this week, there was no census in Scotland in 2020. The rest of the United Kingdom, England, Wales and Ireland all did their census. The excuse given in Scotland, of course, was that it was because of COVID we couldn't do it. But the fact is, everywhere else in the UK managed to do it. I suspect the reason there was no census is because that census would have thrown up really alarming numbers here in Scotland about the number of people who have entered Scotland in the last 10 years from south of the border. And I think that was avoided by the SNP government because they know it's a problem. But, you know, all this information can only be delayed so long. It's going to have to come out this year. And we'll find out those numbers this year. And that will greatly empower those of us who are arguing for a more normal European-type franchise, where it's Indigenous people who vote and only residents that have been here for perhaps 5 to 10 years that are afforded the opportunity. And that will change the result significantly in our favour. But we're not going to win independence with Nicola Sturgeon and these woo-woo nutters in charge. And unfortunately, there is no mechanism in the SNPs. As I'm going to write this week and explain, there is no mechanism. Far from getting rid of them, these people are tightening their grip. I mean, in the whole party, you're only going to have 8 people, ordinary members, that can stand to go on the NEC. From, you know, they claim 125,000 members. How many are in the BAM group? You know, yet they're being allocated seats on the NEC, the equivalent of 30,000 members. It makes absolutely no sense. You know, and it's the exact same if you look at the other woo-woo groups. They're all in there, and they're all I mean, the LGBT and Out for Indy, they're getting the equivalent representation of 30,000 ordinary members on the NEC.
Without a vote.
But this is what the new. I mean, I've got more to say on this because I found out something even more interesting about this. But I mean, see all these groups, they're all the same people. They're interchangeable. And what I think happened is I think they all got together in a big house in Edinburgh and allocated out the places in the NEC. Because there's one of them who complained at the NEC she was having trouble forming a committee for her group. She couldn't get enough people to join a committee. Yet this group's got 2 seats on the NEC. So, I mean, it's just absolutely astonishing. Basically, I'm going to have a lot of fun this week. That's all I'm saying.
Well, personally, as you know, I've made it clear, I believe we should have a plebiscite election. Every election, be it for Westminster or Holyrood, I think should be a plebiscite election.
Absolutely.
Referendum, I don't believe will win. I certainly not with this leader of the SNP and with our deputy being Patrick Harvey of the Greens. They cannot unite the yes movement. They're divisive. They're more divisive than anyone that's ever been involved in the independence movement. And so if they do ever get around to, if I was Boris Johnson, I would say, yeah, have your referendum now. Go for it. We'll help pay for it. Go. Because we will lose it. And don't kid yourself, folks, if you think we're going to win it all, be all right in the night. No, we won't. There is nothing there for us to win it. She's made it virtually impossible. There's been no planning, no discussion in 7 years, no forward planning, no training, nothing. Absolutely nothing is in place to hold a referendum or do it. And when you look at what she's got to help her, they've not got it in them, Heather, have they, to organise it?
No. There's. I mean, it's one thing having a referendum. It's dealing with the consequences if we win. You know, they've done no planning. You know, they were supposed to be setting up ferry ports, and they were supposed to be setting up
the electricity company.
Exactly, and
a bank,
banks, and all that sort of stuff. Nothing's been done. And you know, I'd be worried if we won a referendum that nothing's in place, because who's working on it? Nobody. there doesn't seem to be anybody working on it, apart from poor Mike Russell and his horsepower.
Him and Shergar.
A friend of mine pointed out to me this week that the Scottish investment bank, are planning to invest £50 million in growing trees. And this friend of mine has written to them asking for more details on it. But what we're wondering is this them using taxpayers' money to purchase land from the people who are on the Scottish Government's Economic Advisory Committee? So are we actually giving taxpayers' money? Is the Duke of Buccleuch going to get an offer for some land to build trees, to grow trees on? And the other interesting thing about it is it's coniferous trees. It's not broad-leaved. It's not rebuilding the Scottish oak forest, if you like, the traditional trees of Scotland. It's fir trees.
Which are useless. Next worth is almost useless.
Absolutely. So, there is wee decisions being taken in places, and there's no proper scrutiny. No scrutiny at all. Mm-hmm. None of the opposition parties have picked this up. This is someone on our side that's picked this up and asking the questions. And, it'll be interesting to see where the replies come back.
Tell me, Heather, we're getting close to the end of our time together here, folks, and I want to ask the two of you this question. Is the SNP, as it is now, is it savable? Can it be turned around and made into an independence party again? Do you think that's possible, Heather?
God, I'd love to think it was possible. I'd love to think so, because there are hundreds of people, ordinary members, and people in this country who put their faith in SNP. Yeah. But I really don't see that under the present leadership. I can't see it, because I think she's got her own agenda. I mean, it took me a long time to realise that, and it was like it's like a betrayal. Mm-hmm. It's like finding out that your husband's having an affair. That the sense of betrayal, and that's how I feel about finding out that Nicola's not who I thought she was. And the thing about when you lose trust in somebody, you never ever fully trust them again. And I think for a lot of people, they've lost trust, they've lost faith in SNP. So I don't know if they can come back from that. So that worries me. But I mean, a lot of people see them as the party of independence. For me, I think, our only hope is to try and build the ALBA Party and gain the trust of people in the ALBA Party and move forward as the party of independence. I always thought that when we got independence, there would be other parties in Scotland, who would sort of move in, and the SNP would disband, and we'd have other independents. Well, we'd have other parties, with the same vision for Scotland, or a different vision for Scotland, an independent having achieved independence with a vision of how we move forward in Scotland. But I think so many people have lost faith and trust in SNP that's happened before independence.
Yeah.
ISP, AFI, Scotia Future and the ALBA Party are those parties. We're the parties who would have been formed after we won a referendum. It's just, it's just happened sooner than we thought. So it's up to us now to sort of, move forward and become the party the SNP has used to be.
But I don't want to be, Iain, I don't know about you, I don't want to just be SNP light. I think we need some clear tartan water between us. And Iain, you know about the NEC and the shenanigans going on and the money, etc. Do you think the SNP is savable?
Well, I think you've got to just look at the history of the last couple of years, and it's pretty clear it's not. I mean, if you take yourself back to, was it November 19, when the members did get together and they kicked a lot of these woke people off the NEC and replaced them with folk that had genuine support in the party, you know, and look at what happened. Well, basically what happened was they didn't get enough. The combination of the clique and the wokies together were able to outvote them. So even when they were doing really very dangerous things like ignoring legal counsel, when they were fiddling the number one positions on the list across country, where they were warned by legal counsel that could result in damages actions of hundreds of thousands of pounds. And, you know, you're asking these people to sit in this committee, which has no safeguard for them personally. They are financially liable while you're on that executive for any decisions that are taken. So, you know, if, for instance, Joan McAlpine, when she was removed by that system, had launched a legal claim and had won that legal claim, the individual, the SNP don't have the money, they're broke. The individual members of the NEC could have found themselves liable for that. So you can understand why a number of people left and joined ALBA, you know, because, you know, you're not winning the votes to stop that sort of a responsibility, you know, but you're still liable as long as you're there for the consequences if it all goes wrong. So, you know, it's very understandable. So a lot of good people left and joined ALBA at that point. It gave them a scare, the leadership a scare, and that's why this new governance paper is coming out. They're reducing the ability of the ordinary membership even further now. Who would have believed on an executive of 42 members, you would reduce it down to 32 members, but get rid of the folk that are actually elected by the members and leaving in place all the folk that are there who are appointed. I mean, they are making sure there is no internal route. So therefore, SNP members, the only route they have left is they must immediately stop funding the SNP. They must bring the SNP to a financial collapse. Only then will the folk in the leadership recognise they've got to change their ways and urgently.
Beat it
because, you know, why end in the current situation where there's 600 grand definitely spent? Everything Mike Russell said was a complete
it was embarrassing
fabrication. You know, I mean, if I was wrong about this 600,000, they'd be up waving the bank statement showing me. What they might have is an overdraft facility. That just gives you the opportunity to spend them, to donate the money all over again. Because, you know, overdrafts aren't free. You've got to pay them back. And interest, as you say, Roddy. So, I mean, it's just a complete fabrication, you know. Ring-fenced is not earmarked. You've always got to look, and that's the big betrayal. That's the big warning sign. When you've got to look at the actual phraseology and wording of anything they say. Then you see that actually you're dealing with people that aren't honest.
No, you can say. I mean, they're the motion they're or the resolution they're putting through at conference, online conference, which is easier to control, hit the mute button, etc. Is that, you know, the wording is quite specific. Where we don't want to have a referendum when the pandemic and the effects of it are going on. So we'll come up with a date later. But anyway. We've come to the end of our time, folks. It flies in, it always does. And if you remember in the days of News at 10, they always used to end with a smile, a funny story or something sort of off. And I think the one was the new SNP communications officer at Bobby, who didn't even get into the job after his comments were caught. So the SNP withdrew the Bobby for the first time in a long while without anyone pulling them off, for want of a better phrase. So it was a farce, was it not, Heather, this guy, Bobby?
Definitely. And unfortunately, his name was probably ammunition for a lot of,
like myself.
Yeah. I was just waiting for, what's his name, Lukewarm Dave to dive on that.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
But
did you not find it embarrassing, the great party it once was, Iain, with this happening with this guy?
Well, I mean, if they're throwing this guy out because of his previous tweets, then surely they must get rid of the complaints officer as well.
Well, you would
given what he said about Joanna Cherry repeatedly.
Yeah, but his pronouns are right.
But I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, I can tell you something else. This is hot off the press, from leaked documents. It's not just a complaints officer. There are several staff being employed to deal with complaints. Now, let me just remind you, a few months before, under oath, the chief executive of the party put out his hand and said he was completely unaware of any complaints existing within the party. Now, a few months later, we've got a full-time complaints officer, and the documents I have now reveal that several other members of staff are being allocated to deal with complaints. So amazing. All is not well in the Sturgeon stable, and that's maybe why the horse box has left the building.
Could I just say to any SNP MPs and MSPs watching, and I know you do, even the ones that dislike me are watching, if there's anything you don't feel you're getting enough information from the SNP HQ, get in touch with Big Iain here. He's got all the information on the SNP and anything you want to know. Funds, bank statements, anything you like. We've got it all. So when we're writing our blogs, be assured we know what we're talking about. Heather, every time I say, do you know that Heather with the weather? I'm nearly saying that every single time. Heather with the weather. Maybe we should get a weather report going soon.
Well, it's absolutely pissing down here in Dundee anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah, Scorchio. Iain, Heather, thank you very much for being with me today. And next week's your last week, Iain, for a wee while before you go on a holiday.
Yeah.
Actual holiday, physical holiday.
Real holiday. Please, an appeal. Do not leak me documents in the next 4 weeks. I'm not going to be available to do anything. Save them up. Give me a deluge of them when I get back home.
Well, next week's show will come from Dubai, where I'll be interviewing the Sheikh. Well, no. One part of that's true. One part isn't. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of Through a Scottish Prism as much as I've enjoyed being involved in it. And if there's anything you want to know, anything you want to ask any of us, you know how to get in touch with us. But till we see you again, you and yours, please, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by BarrheadBoy.